Hi, I'm Greg Harton. I'm the editorial page editor of the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and I'm here today with Rusty Turner, the editor of our Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and we have the opportunity today to speak with Josh Bryant of Rogers, who is running as a Republican candidate for the Arkansas House of Representatives in District 96. Mr. Bryant has served 2 terms on the Benton County Quorum Court. He's a businessman in the field of construction and a former U.S. Marine. And we welcome you to the interview.
It's great to be here.
Tell us just a little bit about District 96. Remind people where that is.
So I like to tell people that if you live within about 5 minutes of comfortably getting to see Beaver Lake, you're probably in District 96. It encompasses the entire eastern part of Benton County, all the lake towns, Avoca, Garfield, Eastern Rogers, Beaver Shores, Montagne, what used to be some of Bethel Heights, Eastern Lowell, Hickory Creek. So in between Washington, the state line, Carroll County, and East Rogers is pretty much the square.
And the lake goes right through the middle of it.
Right through the middle of it.
All right. Well, tell us, just starting off, what helped make you decide to run for the House of Representatives, and what you would like to do with 2 years in the state capitol.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that can watch what happens or wonder what happens, and I think I like to make things happen. So when this opportunity came up, and Mr. Hodges decided that he wanted to move on into the business world, I decided I'd throw my hat in the ring and see who else could throw in there with me for the primary. I kind of lucked out where nobody decided to go in the primary, so here I am. So the first 2 years of me getting down there, a lot of times when you get into a new position, you want to watch just to see what happens. And since I'm not really a watch and see kind of guy, I just got to go in there and make sure that bad bills don't get past us. There's a lot of people down in the legislature, and they've all got great ideas and different backgrounds, different experiences, and what works for southeastern Arkansas may not work for northwest Arkansas. And so it'll be incumbent upon myself and the other delegation up here to make sure that the laws passed in the state are applicable to northwest Arkansas.
Do you feel like there are issues particular to the district that you hear from people that they are particularly concerned about, that you would go down there and try to the state capitol in Little Rock and try to make a difference on?
Yeah, there is a common theme as I go out in the district, and that common theme happens to rotate around probably issue number 1, and it's not necessarily the roads or infrastructure, but it's taxation. I think the majority of Republicans in my area, and some independents, a lot of people are probably more registered optional than Republican, but most of them just feel that the state of Arkansas has not done a great job in their tax rates. That's now obviously going to be a very difficult thing to remedy because we like what we've got. We like the services that we receive. We like, what roads we do have. We like those. So when I say we can just go cut taxes, I don't think it's possible just to immediately go in there and cut taxes. However, we can cut spending. And a lot of the naysayers say, well, we're not really overspending. Well, if we have a $200 million increase in revenues every year, and we're spending all of it to catch up with the budget, then we can probably try to make some wise decisions to just not increase our spending to match the budget.
So when you said issue 1, that's the half-cent sales tax that currently will sunset in a couple of years, but the proposal on the ballot would make that half-cent sales tax permanent to go to highways and roads. I assume from your statement there that you don't favor amendment 1 or issue 1 at this point. That's not something you'd favor.
Yeah, I've made it clear that when I step into that ballot box, I'm going to press against. And it's not because infrastructure. It's not because I probably can't afford, $100 more a year. It goes on principle for me that in 2012, when the ballot initiative was proposed in legislature, there was a lot of pushback to Jonathan Barnett and that team. And he kept coming back to the table with amendments. And one of the amendments added to it was a sunset clause. And another was to give a little bit of that piece to cities and counties. to sweeten that pot. So, which I'm not against, that as an amendment or as, the taxes we're paying now. But in my mind, it just perpetuates the thought that, politicians are liars. They go in with all good intentions, but the same politicians that were there 10 years ago aren't necessarily the same politicians that are there today making those decisions. They're just trying to figure out how to accomplish the goal of the 10-year sunset clause, and they haven't figured it out in 8 years, so they don't think they can figure it out in 2 more. So the next step is just to make the sunset not be a sunset, add it as a permanent tax. And so in my opinion, in the ballot box, when I press against, I'm not pressing against necessarily the infrastructure needs. On a quorum court, I know exactly what the impact's going to be and the struggle that we're going to have to do in the county if the vote fails. But at the same time, I think we need to approach it in a more honest measure to the citizens of Arkansas.
I take it from your answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're not really disputing the need for work on the highways and the need for cities and counties to have some money for roads and streets out there. Is that fair? That's fair.
I think they need to do it, but they did it for so long. Up until 2012, we were getting along. We wanted to improve those. We wanted to go back and make some changes. It seems like all we did was we threw the money in the budget. We hired more people. We bought more equipment. And now when we look down the road in 2 years, when that sugar pot goes away, we're going to have to make the decision to pull back on people and pull back on equipment, which means maybe we don't have as many roads. But I think with 2.5 years left, legislatures in Arkansas, if the vote fails, that's enough time to course correct their budgets a little bit and see where it lands. However, I see the governor's posted that he's very confident issue 1 will pass. I'd be interested to see what the numbers in Benton County look like. We tried that 8-cent sales tax increase for a new courts facility, and it got beat by a pretty good margin. So we'll see what 2 years has done in the voters' mind of Benton County.
The question of taxes in general, it certainly sounds like you feel like the district is at least starting out. If taxation is the question, the answer is generally going to be no. Do you feel like that's going to carry through your term and regardless of what the issues are?
Yes, I do. When people look at, I think there's actually an article in the paper accompanying the article on Sunday about the cons for the road and the pros for the road. And the cons article was, we've got the second highest sales tax in the nation next to Tennessee, but the caveat is Tennessee doesn't have an income tax, which I personally didn't know Tennessee didn't. So I think if the answer is, do we raise taxes to accomplish our goals? Most of my constituency is going to say no.
Okay.
Well, we're talking about issues. Have you formed an opinion about issue 2, the term limits issue?
Yeah, issue 2, 16 years or 12 years with a 4-year break. Personally, I was comfortable with 16 years. I think that's plenty of time for a person to go to the legislature and get some of their goals done. 12 years is, that's plenty of time too. It gives you 4 years to get back into industry, see how your laws have affected people, and then maybe get back in it if there's not a good candidate otherwise. So I'm probably going to vote for it, just because I see either way as term limit. So that's not a problem for me. I was a little bit irritated that all 3 of the amendments that came out of the legislature obviously don't have titles. So most people, when they get to the ballot box, all they're going to see is generic terms about term limits. And if they didn't do their homework, they're going to be just flipping the coin.
Yeah. So how about issue 3? How does the coin come up for you on issue 3?
Issue 3, I'm for. That was kind of a struggle. I read lots of commentary both ways. And I think in today's advanced technology, it's different than what it was when the Constitution was amended to allow citizens to put an initiative on the ballot. If you've got out-of-state interests, which is what some of these are, not some of them are not, but they camp out in the 3 or 4 or 5 most populous areas of the nation. I'm sorry, of the state, and they just collect signatures. It really does. It disenfranchises everybody else from the state. So some of the things I probably, like, I didn't mind a cure period. I know that's going to be pulled back. I didn't mind some of those things because we're humans and we all make mistakes. But overall, increasing the voter turnout as far as getting those signatures to more counties and having more requirements to it, I think is a good thing.
And just to play devil's advocate, one of the criticisms of issue 3 is that it's just going to make it that much harder for a citizen-led proposal to make it to the ballot. Does that concern you at all?
It doesn't, because there's a lot of good firms out there that know exactly how to drive voters. So I think if you've got a good, well-funded, well thought out idea, you can get a lot of traction with it and hire these firms that are out of Little Rock that can really take your campaign to the next level and be able to get those signatures to get on the ballot.
Okay, fair enough.
How do you feel what we're all dealing with, this COVID-19, and seems to get a little better, and then suddenly it gets worse in terms of the cases. How do you feel like the governor and the state has handled that emergency?
I think the onslaught of the initial, what kind of watch and see what other states are doing, see if what is coming to happen is actually coming to fruition, was a good approach. I don't even necessarily mind that the executive order was initiated. However, as probably seen in my other statements, I feel that we kind of lost sight over what the people's will is. I know the executive office of our state is doing the best they can to minimize the spread, to keep the hospitals patient counts low so they can keep the services open for everybody. I get that, but from what I am seeing, at least in our local hospitals, the nurses that come out that are in my community or the doctors say it's really not that bad now. Is that a result of the action we took? Let's just assume it is. But I think for the most part, most people at this stage in the game, they may know people that have tested positive, but the symptoms were not there. They are cautious with what they do. They have their own self-control, their own liberties. Some don't want to be told what to do. Not necessarily, a sovereign citizen, but they feel like their liberties were encroached on. I'm probably one of those that feel as though if it's my decision to wear a mask into a place of business, or the business owners view that they want me as a patron to wear a mask, I want that mutual respect. I don't think a lot of my constituency would say that having the governor tell us that we have to, as business owners or as citizens, is what we should have done. I think it crossed the line. As far as the numbers going up and down, I struggle with the previous flu symptoms. Telling my child, hey, wash your hands, don't touch your face. Wash your hands, don't touch your face. And now we're putting an object on their face, sending them to school, which everything that we laugh about does happen. Comes home with a different mask, touches it all the time because it bothers, it irritates them, and they don't have the self-control that adults do, or most adults do. So I just think we're ready to be done with it, move on, and at some point we're going to have to just take our shot, or else we'll be living like this for the next unforeseeable future.
Oh,
and again, Josh, just playing devil's advocate, why does a temporary rule that everybody needs to wear masks in public, why is that crossing the line when we're not crossing the line when we require people to be decently dressed when they go out in public, or we require people not to smoke indoors at restaurants? Why are those things okay, and why is requiring a temporary requirement to wear a mask not.
Well, you're putting a mask on healthy people. It's like asking a guy with a shirt on to go ahead and add a sweatshirt on. It's just majority of people are healthy when they walk outside their home. If they're not, ideally they would have stayed home anyway, whether it was flu or another illness that was contagious. And I didn't mind the first 30 days to see what happens, but to not involve the people, to bring them back to the table, to say is this the best course of action, which he probably would have got a yes. He would have got some buy-in from stakeholders across the state. I just feel it's even though it's not decency laws, they I guess they got set up for since the beginning of our civilization, that there's some decency and some decorum. Some states obviously getting rid of some of that decorum, where it's it's legal to walk outside half naked, and that's up to them. That's just something our society hasn't accepted yet. But as far as requirement to wear a mask on an otherwise healthy individual, it should be their choice.
I think in the Sunday newspaper, you had talked about the emergency powers, and the I think you had an idea that potentially the changing the state law so that if the governor invokes emergency powers, that might automatically trigger a special session of the legislature. Do I have that right?
Yeah, it might be too broad. There's executive powers exist for a number of reasons, and I wouldn't say every time an executive action is generated that it just automatically triggers us to be there. I would say that there should be a time limit on the executive authority, which there is, but that time limit, if you want to do it again, that second round should generate a legislative session. That would be my thing. I'm not saying that any governor in the futures, he has to do his job or she has to do her job. I totally understand that, and we want them to be able to do that, because that's how you make swift decisions. But as my article said, swift decisions aren't always accurate. You pull and shoot. You're just trying to get a round down range. You're not looking to see that it hit its target. Well, if you move that forward 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, and you got to take a shot again, you better have some backup. You better have had time to get your aim right. And that's where I think, all the people elect one governor, then local people elect their leaders to go to the House or the Senate, and they should weigh in on those decisions when they are prolonged.
So you're thinking that a legislative session would, I'm trying to envision what the criticisms of that would be, and I'm sure one of them would be, well, you're guiding in the current situation, that you're guiding public health decisions by politics as opposed to actual public health. What do you envision the legislature actually doing in a session? Whether it's 3 months, 6 months, whatever the time limit is, what do you kind of see the legislature getting together to do to help with the emergency that's being dealt with?
Yeah, I kind of view that as politics being the necessary evil. Any governor, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, is going to appoint people in their cabinet that align with their views. So if we're asking for an emergency to be viewed, we're still, whether either party's in the executive branch, we're asking through those views or policies to be determined by one set of lenses. I think much like any decision, you put it into a committee and you get opposing viewpoints. You get a lot more data brought to the table, and ideally, a well-grounded adult person will look at all points to make the decision, rather than the points of people that are appointed directly underneath them. So I see that as the benefit. You're no longer just looking through the eyes of one director at one government office. You're asking for industry, you're asking for the medical professions across the state, from different parts of the state, from different parts of the nation, to come together to say, this is what works, this is what doesn't, let's compromise to move forward.
let's touch base on kind of what the nation and to some extent locally we've been dealing with in terms of the race relations and law enforcement. What kind of ideas do you carry into office if you're elected on November 3rd to approach that? Because I'm assuming that there will be some legislative proposals that are touching on race relations and those sorts of things. And have you given some thought to how you might tackle that?
I have. I've of course, what hits the media is the proposed hate crimes legislation. Now, whether or not the legislature pulls a special session or the governor authorizes a special session prior to the election or waits until session is gavelled in, TBD. But, I think that legislation looks great when you look at the title. I mean, who opposes hate? Well, everybody should oppose hate. But I think once you get into the meat of the legislation, you realize that it's really just letting Lady Justice peek out of her blindfold. Hate is hate, in my opinion. The crimes are committed because I've got a disdain or a dislike for that individual, because that's the elementary definition of hate is, an extreme dislike. So if you're going to let Lady Justice peek out of her blindfold to see that that there's hate based on veteran status or race or gender, then why not sports team affiliation or political affiliation? There's just that avenue just keeps going on and on and on. So it's a sensitive subject. It's one that it does need to be dealt with. I don't think it's being dealt with in the appropriate way. You hear the terms, systemic racism. I think that turns a lot of people off. You're saying by the nature of you being in the majority, you're automatically a racist, as they might say in the different movements. I think that needs to be rephrased, because, racism when I grew up just meant you felt your race was superior. And I personally don't think, and I don't know many of any of my colleagues or friends or family that think they are superior. So that automatically, they don't even want to come to the table to talk. They just push it away. Now, however, if you said, hey, what about your prejudices? What about how people think of certain things that people are doing? You can go through a broad spectrum. You can say, African American with pants around below their hips. What does that make you think? Well, it's a stereotype. They're not thinking, oh, I'm better than that person because he's not he's not my same color. That's just not what we view as normal. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means a culture issue. Same thing with a Caucasian male wearing a tank top. Things come to mind is that a spouse beater, a wife abuser? It's not saying that it's a racist issue. It's just saying that we take our prejudices too far. So I think one way we can get majority to come to the table to have these conversations is to talk about prejudices, not about racism.
The situation we found ourselves in as a country, and certainly I think down in Little Rock in the legislature where you've got representation from across the state, that there's a lot of anger involved in some of this police brutality, and there will be I think some measures to address that, just from the perspective of trying to address some of the concerns of the folks who have been protesting and trying to have their voices heard. Certainly the hate crime legislation is one aspect, but do you feel like that the legislature needs to dive into that a little deeper? Is it a problem that is strong enough that the legislature needs to dive into?
I think as far as police reform goes, to me, it's not an issue that can be addressed on that large of a scale. What we're doing is we're saying we're opening up our office. So we'll use the Benton County Sheriff's Office. He has a need for X amount of officers. And he opens that application up to all that are willing and able. Now, it takes a special person to want to serve in that capacity, in my opinion, to put yourself in harm's way for a meager salary that's probably not worth what it should be paid. But that's, it's a government job in a sense, so that's what we can afford, so that's what we paid. And then much like any contract, that was accepted by the applicant to work for that pay, so he's going to do his job. So as any good employer, we're just got to ask them to do their job. So to take the tools and the resources away from our employees, what good employer or business owner would do that? If we're going to change anything, it has to be changed at the scope of practice. So if we've got 100 laws on the books, we can't just say, don't enforce these 10 laws. We have to remove those 10 laws from the books. And I'm gonna predict that as a society, we don't want to remove the laws that we have on our books, because it protects the weak. It's ensures safety of our communities. So we can sure take a look at that, pulling back the laws, but to defund or take away resources from any law enforcement agency when all we're doing is asking them as employees that are trained, that are willing, that are most of them humble, that's just absurd to me.
The one of the issues that's not specifically in your district, but certainly water quality is a big issue in your district. You've got the issue about the hog farm over around the Buffalo River, and the governor has supported a permanent moratorium right around the river for those sorts of facilities. How do you feel they ought to approach that issue? It's been bandied about, in some of the legislative committees and all, and so far, really hasn't gotten anywhere. As a representative down there, how would you approach that?
That's an issue I probably haven't given as much research to as maybe other issues. I'm a big proponent of property rights. However, there's got to be a line drawn to what goes on my property shouldn't affect my neighbor's property. So there's a delicate balance of what that looks like, in my opinion. So I would say that there's a need for farmers, for agriculture. I think Arkansas is still one of the leaders in the nation for that industry, and to just put an end to it affects the livelihoods of not only that farmer, but thousands of people down the line that work in that industry. So I don't think to stop it would be the root answer. I think to see what can be done to mitigate, to minimize, to assist economically with those procedures in place to minimize the effects of nature, of the land users downstream. Those would probably be the factors that I would more want to consider rather than just shutting down industry.
So, Josh, it looks like we're close to time, but wanted to give you an opportunity. If there's something that you wanted to talk about, an issue you want to bring up and discuss that we haven't asked you about, now'd be the time. So, is there anything that you'd like to bring up and visit about? Go for it. So.
Well, I wasn't prepared for what would I do.
Yeah.
I've got a list on my phone of different issues that have been brought up by my constituents from industry throughout Benton County, Washington County. A lot of them are just rules and regulations changes inside different departments, which are probably a bigger challenge because they're small potatoes compared to what probably is going to happen or should happen. But it's still, those one or two issues will affect countless users of that industry. So my goal is to fight for the little guy and see what we can get done to affect policy change down Little Rock.
I guess I should note that in this question, if you get elected, because you do face a Democrat on November 3rd. But if you get elected, are there any particular committees down in the House that you would like to try to get on?
The one committee that I mentioned, I've been told shouldn't be a problem, and that's cities, counties, and local government committee. I feel that I've done business with most of the major cities here. Pretty good relationship with the mayors throughout them, and obviously with my county experience and understanding how local government works, I think I'd be an asset to that. Otherwise, I'll be used where the speaker and the caucus can use me.
I think you had been appointed by the governor to Child Welfare Agency Board. Is that right? No. Okay.
That might be.
I learned my lesson in doing some research on this, that there are a lot of Josh Bryants of Rogers,
Yes,
including one attorney, I think. So I think that that must be one of the other Josh Bryants.
Yes.
But all right. Well, I think that's all of the questions that we've got. Rusty, do you have anything else?
No. Just want to thank you for being here, Josh. We appreciate your time.
You bet, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it very much, and take care of yourself and good luck out on the campaign.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All righty.